Thank you, Donald. Good evening, everybody. Well, it was the 2nd of October that the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi went into the Saudi Arabian embassy in Istanbul. He has not been seen since, and as I'm sure you know, there are lots of allegations around that he was tortured, murdered, dismembered and removed from that embassy. Certainly, he has not been seen since the 2nd of October. The police, Turkish police, are there. They're searching the building. We've got no answers, but it's funny, isn't it? I mean, it's Saudi Arabia. What's the reaction been? Can you imagine if this was a Russian embassy anywhere in the world, that somebody had entered and had disappeared? There would be international uproar. And yet, what do we get from President Trump in response to this?
Well, there are many other things we could do, but when we take away $110 billion of purchases from our country, that hurts our workers, that hurts our factories, that hurts all of our companies. You know, you're talking about 500,000 jobs. Jobs. And yet, you know, back in March, when we had the Salisbury spy poisoning scandal, this is how our Prime Minister spoke.
Under the Vienna Convention, the United Kingdom will now expel 23 Russian diplomats who have been identified as undeclared intelligence officers. They have just 1 week to leave. This will be the single biggest expulsion for over 30 years, and it reflects the fact that this is not the first time that the Russian state has acted against our country.
So when it's Russia, we speak very strongly, we act very quickly, we expel diplomats, and we had support from much of the rest of the world. Indeed, America expelled 60 Russian diplomats. The Germans only 3 diplomats, for reasons that I will come back to. What's our response been to the disappearance of this journalist? Well, we have given a joint statement with Germany and France, because, of course, we don't really do foreign policy anymore. We tend to do it at a European level. And we've expressed grave concern and called for a credible investigation into the disappearance of this journalist. Now, look, folks, it's all very straightforward, isn't it? Trump said it, you know, and OK, he sent Mike Pompeo, his Secretary of State, who's gone to Saudi Arabia. It looks like, after the initial total denials, that the Saudis will come to a confession that says that a team acted way above any instructions they were given, and that in turn they will be punished. But, you know, Theresa May, what about this country? Well, back in March, we were told that the UK and Saudi Arabia had a broad ambition to strike nearly $100 million worth of contracts between our countries over the course of the next decade. Now, I've been critical pretty openly of Saudi Arabia for some years. This was me with Jon Snow on Channel 4 News a couple of years ago.
The compromise with Saudi is that we sell a great deal of material to them, including weapons. There are a large number of British jobs dependent upon it. Are you prepared to face the economic consequences of dealing with that?
The idea that Saudi Arabia is an ally of ours in this struggle, I think, is misguided and misplaced. Do you know, Saudi Arabia have said they won't take a single migrant or refugee from war-torn Syria or elsewhere. Why? They say that it would upset the balance of their society, and yet they're perfectly happy to fund the building of 200 new mosques in Germany.
So I've been critical of Saudi Arabia for years, the way in which they've acted in many regards. Folks, I'm asking you, are we being hypocritical here in our lack of condemnation of Saudi Arabia, when had it been Russia, everybody would have been screaming blue murder? Tell me, have I got this completely wrong? If you think I have, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think actually our government are right to be cautious until we've got more facts, in which case text to 84850. Or am I right? Basically, this is completely hypocritical. It's all about money. We're applying double standards. Saudi Arabia actually in many ways have behaved appallingly. But, and you heard the line from Jon Snow and you've heard the line from President Trump, money matters more. That's how you feel. Tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can watch us and comment there too. Tony says, of course we're hypocrites. If this was Russia, the UN Security Council would be meeting now. You know it. Tony, I think you're absolutely right. We are being hypocritical, but I'm of the opinion that the whole of the Western foreign policy has been based on hypocrisy for many years now, Chris. That's what Chris thinks. Kevin is a new caller from St Helens who's pulled over in his car to speak to us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the call.
Not at all.
I'm absolutely right behind you there. I think hypocrisy at its finest, and the reason for it, I am sure, is that if you've got the oil, you can do what the hell you want. Not just with killing journalists and killing millions of people in the Yemen. Not only do they do that, but the US and the UK support them. Why? Because they've got the oil.
Well, they've got the oil, but also, Kevin, they buy an awful lot of aeroplanes that we manufacture and assemble, don't they?
They do indeed, yeah. And we're sort of, if you'd let the upper echelons try and wriggle out of it, they'll, I'm sure, tell you that we're in the grasp of Saudi because of the amount of trade that we get from them. But why should trade come into this? Surely this is to do with humanity.
But Kevin, supposing you listen, you and I are on the same track on this, and of course we're being hypocritical. You know, we do far less business with Russia. The one country that does a huge amount of business with Russia is of course Germany, which is probably why they expelled only 3 diplomats and the rest of us a lot more. But Kevin, if you and I now went to your local pub and we sat down with a couple of fellas that worked in the aerospace industry in this country, whose jobs were dependent on business with Saudi Arabia, you and I would find it a more difficult conversation then, wouldn't we?
Definitely, absolutely. Again, it's the grasp that Saudi Arabia seems to have on the majority of the Western world.
Yes.
Because of the arms that they're buying off us. But what do they do with those arms? Do they keep them all themselves, or are they selling them on?
Well, there are some that would argue that the war that's going on in Yemen, much of that actually uses Saudi Arabian equipment.
Absolutely.
I'd rather not go too deep into that, but I think there is strong evidence that they're involved in a very nasty war there. Kevin, but it is about jobs, and again and again and again. I mean, not just on the disappearance of this journalist, but actually, it is the Wahhabi strain of Islam that they've been pushing in this country. That's what's led to lots of people wearing burqas on our streets. We never used to see that, did we?
Absolutely. That strain of Islam is the strain that causes all the problems that we seem to have. I think with that particular religion, and
they've been funding it. So
absolutely,
and that's why, Kevin, I've been a long-term critic of Saudi Arabia, and yet, it's been Trump has very much become the ally of Saudi Arabia. He's gone for the Sunni against the Shias in Iran. It is difficult. It is difficult. Kevin, what would you do? I mean, this journalist has disappeared. Do you think there should be stronger international condemnation than we've seen so far?
I think we should liberate their oil.
Well, I tell you what, I've got an even better idea. Why don't we in the West become self-sufficient as much as we can with energy?
Absolutely.
And I say that on the day when, not too far away from where you are now, we've started extracting shale gas, and I know it's a controversial technique. There's been a huge lobby against it.
Why have we got the Chinese as well building Hinkley Point? Why have we got a foreign power?
Do you know, I'd love to get George Osborne. I'd love to get George Osborne in a corner and ask him strategically why the Chinese and why he guaranteed that price to them. Kevin, thank you for your call. Nigel is calling from Wokingham. Hi, Nigel.
Yeah, Nigel, we speak again.
Hello.
I spoke with you many moons ago when I said Donald Trump was about as welcome as Novichok was in Salisbury. I'm absolutely impressed. I totally agree with you, Nigel, about the hypocrisy of the relationship between our Western governments and Saudi Arabia. I found it absolutely nauseating to hear Donald Trump talking about jobs when we're dealing with the death, the murder of a journalist who is probably guilty of exposing what's really going on within Saudi Arabia.
Well, he has been he's been a very persistent critic.
The government in Saudi Arabia is vile. It always has been. I phoned up the show many moons ago when they actually dealt with the beheading as of a maid who was pregnant by some senior members of a family. They have no compassion whatsoever, and we don't care. As long as they buy arms, as long as they keep on giving us money, we do not care. And what we're actually doing, we're taking a softly approach. At the end of the day, people do need jobs. People have got to work, but do they really want to work and support for a nation which shows its true hand by the actions that have gone on in Turkey?
Well,
I'm right with you. If that was a Russian involvement,
absolutely.
But no, the Saudis, they can do whatever they want, and it is totally wrong, and it is beyond trade. It is totally beyond trade. I know we've got to go through the pain barrier, as we inevitably will do with this Brexit deal. Sometimes we've got to face the consequences of our actions, and if it means that jobs go, at the end of the day, we should be leading the moral high ground, and it should be well above money. Donald Trump's comments, as I said, nauseating. We need some spine.
Well, I tell you what, Nigel, Donald Trump said it, but I think the British government's position is pretty much exactly the same as Donald Trump's, isn't it? I mean, we as a country have not on our own said a single thing since this journalist disappeared.
I never thought that I would agree with you on anything at all. But I've got to say, the one thing that I will give you, that you've got spine. And a lot of these politicians have got no spine whatsoever.
Well, there you go. There you go. Nigel, thank you. I'm getting a similar reaction on Twitter here from Ford, who says, oh my God, I'm agreeing with Nigel Farage on what the Saudis have done to that reporter. This is well out of order. Well, there you are, folks. You never know. But please, maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe actually jobs and money matter more than morality. But if they do, why do we have this double standard of the way we treat Russia compared to the way we treat Saudi Arabia? Answers on a postcard, please. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 6:15 and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
Ahead of a key summit of EU leaders tomorrow, the European Council presidents warned a breakthrough on Brexit talks may not be possible without further movement from the UK. A spokesperson for the Speaker of the Commons says he'll make any announcement on his future directly to the House. It follows reports John Bercow's standing down from the role next summer. The US Secretary of State met with Saudi Arabia's King Salman in Riyadh to discuss the disappearance of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. LBC weather, weakening bands of rain and drizzle moving across England and Wales overnight. Drier though elsewhere, a low of 4 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm J. Louise Knight, and there are queues out of town on the A1M from South Hatfield at 3 to an accident at Welwyn at Junction 6. The A13 still shut from Stamford Le Hope to the Five Bells interchange following an accident this morning. And then the A12 is queuing out of town all the way from the M25 to an accident after the Noak Bridge turn-off. One lane is closed. There are long delays out of town. The A40 towards a lorry that's broken down, blocking one lane after the Swakeleys roundabout, and Ruislip High Street's blocked with an accident. As for the trains, Southern are warning of 15-minute delays from Clapham Junction to East Croydon, and there are 15-minute delays on Gatwick Express from Victoria to Gatwick Airport.
This is LBC.
So, you've received a notice from HMRC inquiring into your tax affairs. Any investigation is likely to be disruptive to your business and costly, especially if you don't get the right help. At Barnes Rofe, we recommend that you seek advice straight away. Our specialist tax team will support you no matter what the issue is. For a free confidential chat, contact the tax experts at barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for business.
Your business has come this far, but now's your time to soar into the skies of spectacular with a fast, affordable Funding Circle business loan. With decisions in as little as 24 hours and a dedicated account manager, there's no waiting around. So join the thousands of businesses who have taken out a Funding Circle loan and help your business fly. Apply today at fundingcircle.com. Authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. T's and C's apply.
We're all born 4x4, adventurous, curious, unstoppable. And now every Jeep Renegade and Compass has even more reasons to stay that way. 5 years warranty, 3 years servicing, 5 years roadside assistance, and 0% APR. Search Jeep 535 to discover more. Jeep, born to be wild. T's and C's apply. 5 years or 75,000 miles warranty. Available on Jeep Renegade and Compass. Minimum 30% customer deposit. 36-month term. HP sales until 31/12/18, subject to status. Jeep Financial Services.
It's time. Time to join the millions of people that meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. With stunning HD video, crisp audio, and instant wireless sharing across any mobile, tablet, or desktop device. But the best thing about Zoom? It just works. So ditch the distractions, join the movement, and meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. Visit zoom.us to set up your free account today. That's zoom.us. Zoom video conferencing.
Do you need finance to purchase property, for development, or at auction? Do you have a case that doesn't quite fit the criteria of the banks? Then speak to Vector Capital. We specialize in short-term and bridging finance, and we can give you a decision in principle the very same day. Visit vectorcapital.co.uk. That's vectorcapital.co.uk. Vector Capital. Business to business finance. Fast.
The high-quality kitchen you've dreamed of at a price well within your budget. That's Room Sense.
That's Room Sense.
This month, all kitchens are half price with a free oven hob and extractor. Book your free home design visit today at roomsense.co.uk.
Quality at a price you can afford. That's Room Sense.
Offer ends soon. Minimum spend applies.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So journalist Jamal Khashoggi goes missing, completely gone, as he walks into the Saudi embassy in Istanbul on the 2nd of October and is not seen since. And all you get from the British government is a joint statement with France and Germany, which is, I would say, pretty lukewarm, in that we say we express grave concern and we want a credible investigation to ensure those responsible for the disappearance are held to account. Is that really good enough? Can you imagine if somebody had gone missing in a Russian embassy, what the response would have been? Aren't we being very hypocritical? Or am I wrong? Is the sheer number of jobs and the amount of trade that we do with Saudi Arabia more important than an issue such as this? And talking of big moral debates, well, High Court Judge Dame Laura Cox has reported she independently has looked into the allegations of a culture of bullying that exists within the House of Commons. And what she finds is that staff have had their bottoms and breasts touched in an atmosphere fuelled by ready access to alcohol. It's all a pretty ugly report, and she says that it's difficult to envisage how the reforms needed could be delivered under the current senior House administration. And of course, one of those most important people there is John Bercow, the Speaker himself. Now, he, of course, has also been met with allegations of bullying. He denies all of it. But the question is, should Bercow stay or should Bercow go? One or two MPs, led by Conservative MP Maria Miller, are calling for him to stand down, saying, there is real reform needed. The BBC say he will stay until next summer. But extraordinarily, some comments from Labour MPs this afternoon that I find really, really difficult to believe. Ben Bradshaw, Labour MP, for example, says that we've got to have a Speaker who stands up for backbenchers and to an overbearing executive, and who is prepared to drive through a Brexit that is intolerable to members of this House. So the hint is that with Bercow there, we can stop the government giving us an intolerable Brexit. And even more amazingly, Dame Margaret Beckett was interviewed within the last hour, and she said this: "Abuse is terrible. It shouldn't happen. Behaviour should change anyway. But yes, if it comes to it, the most difficult decision we've made for hundreds of years trumps bad behaviour." Well, that's the sisterhood for you, isn't it? The fact that female assistants in the House of Commons are being abused, bullied, treated terribly doesn't matter, because Dame Margaret Beckett seems to think that Mr Bercow can do his best to stop Brexit going through. I wonder in a few years' time, when some of these people that are saying this look back on their comments, how they will feel. Right, back to Saudi Arabia, and we've got a very interesting comment here from Mohammed in Nottingham. He says, you're spot on about Saudi. They have introduced the Wahhabi ideology of Islamic extremism. Also, that country has no human rights. May is a hypocrite. You can't have one stance against Russia and then another against Saudi Arabia. Keep up the good work. Mohammed, thank you for that. What does Tony in Woodford make of this?
Well, Nigel, I totally agree with the government stance on this.
Right.
Although it's very tragic, if it's true that this man has been killed by the Saudis, because we really don't know the full facts. It's the same as when anything kicks off about Russia. We're ready to accuse, but there's never any full facts. Until the full facts come out, then I think that the conversation's a waste of time. What I do think should happen is that our people should talk to the king, the royal family there, and try and implement some type of change regarding human rights. Because if you keep making accusations that they've denied, it's going to be very bad.
All right, so you're saying that it's right to be cautious until we have absolute evidential proof?
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, Nigel, there's no morality in big business. And if you're going to single out the Saudis, then, you can pick on Israel, you can pick on Russia, China. It's never going to stop. So the whole world would just come to a complete standstill if we took a moral view on everything. It's just not going to happen. You know that. And I know that. So,
no, I was making a point, Tony, that, when we had a big debate in this country about what was happening in Syria and in that region and people fleeing, the fact that Saudi Arabia refused to take a single refugee because they thought Syrians coming into their country would upset the balance of their society. They don't exactly reach out, do they, to the rest of the world?
But the whole world knows that. And it still doesn't stop Mr. Trump or Theresa May for, selling stuff to them. So I just think we could just back off and use diplomacy and, try and talk to them to gently change the way they think and the things they do. Because at the end of the day,
Trump
jobs
did speak.
do depend on them. Jobs do depend on them.
Trump did speak to King Salman. And, it was completely denied. They denied any knowledge of whatever may have happened. Now we're told that there will be a statement coming out fairly soon saying that effectively rogue killers, a hit squad of 15 people who were seen to go into that embassy, carried it out. Tony, when we have evidential evidence, when it's there, when clear evidence is there of what's happened to this guy, do you think our actions should change then, or do we have to say that in practical terms, the world has to carry on?
In practical terms, the world has to carry on, yes, because...
And yet not with Russia, Tony.
No, well, everybody knows that, but it's the same thing, isn't it? It's if there's any criticism of Israel or any criticism of any other countries, it kind of all kicks off. But, I just think there's better ways of dealing with it. As I say, it's tragic if it's true that it's happened to this journalist, but I think the best way is powers of persuasion and sitting down with them and saying, look, change,
All right, Tony, your view, I think, does reflect the way that the British and American governments feel, and I thank you for making it. While we're talking hypocrisy, I hope, in all the well-deserved criticism of Saudi Arabia's behaviour in Istanbul, that we are not forgetting the 100 journalists held in prison by Turkey. A bit of a rich irony, no? Michael, you make a very good point. Why don't Saudi Arabia manufacture their own weapons rather than importing billions worth? Surely they have the monetary resources to manufacture their own and to import the skill sets if they require them. Caroline, I don't know the answer to that, but I would suggest that setting up very high-tech industries from zero, firstly, is a very difficult thing to do. And secondly, if you've got shed loads of money, and by the way, oil, I saw last week was trading at $85 a barrel, the highest it's been for nearly 5 years. If you've got shed loads of money, why bother? Because you just go and buy stuff off the shelf and find the price you want. What does Andy in Farnham make of all this? Andy, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I'm just intrigued to know where we go now, because after Russia with Salisbury and now with Saudi, basically Europe is like the barking dog next door. They don't hear us. They're not interested. They run the world. So therefore, yes, you can have your feedback. Thanks very much indeed. And they'll do what they want, when they want, because we're dependent on oil we're dependent on jobs, so therefore they just ignore us. So it's just all political rhetoric, as always.
Well, we do, Andy, put very severe sanctions, which we currently have at the moment on Russia. So we could do it. It would cause us economic harm to do so. But otherwise, don't we just look a bit hypocritical, Andy? We're tough on one country because of what it does and not on another.
We are, Nigel, but as we know, Britain's running on a massive overdraft. We're not going to install any kind of, should we say, monetary sanctions or any of those aspects because we physically can't afford it. It'll bankrupt the country. So we have this morality that, we mustn't do this, we mustn't do that. But ultimately, we've created our own destiny by just being the dog next door.
Right, so basically, nothing's going to change, yeah?
None at all.
No,
What's happened after Salisbury?
You may be right, Andy. Majid in Peterborough. Majid, surely there are some double standards here, aren't there?
No, just Majid, and it's great to talk to you again. Listen, mate, I love you a bit, so I agree with everything you say, but you are totally wrong on this.
Right, go on and shoot.
I mean, the hypocrisy we're coming out with now, like this is something that's new, that's happened, it's never happened before. This has been happening for years and years and years, and we're guilty of it just like everybody else. Okay, but they've been caught out. Now, what we're going to do, shoot ourselves in the foot and say, right, okay, well, our luxury cars, we'll stop selling Rolls-Royce, Aston Martins, Bentleys to them, we won't sell any arms to them. What are they going to do? They'll go to China, they'll go to somewhere else, they'll buy it. They don't care an iota about what we do, really don't. The way to do this would be through the United Nations. And what's happened to the United Nations Security Council? Where's the general meeting?
I know. And earlier on, somebody texted, if this was Russia, they'd be meeting right now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So if you want to do something
so you're not disagreeing that much with me, are you?
Well, I am because... all right, mate, we're compromising a little bit, but nothing is going to change. What are you going to do? Put a financial restriction on them? They don't care. You might just expel a few diplomats. They don't care. Are you going to boycott their goods? We sell more to them than they sell to us. They don't care. If they want us, all they're going to do is increase the price of oil, and we're all going to suffer.
Well, they can't do it on their own. But, Majid, all I would say to you is this. I have been a consistent critic of Saudi Arabia, firstly on human rights, and secondly on the spread of this Wahhabism right across the whole of Europe. And I'm not going to change my position. Thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 6:30 and time for the news with Lisa Aziz.
The EU's demanding new concrete proposals from Theresa May on how to end the deadlock in Brexit talks. European Council President Donald Tusk has warned a breakthrough may not be possible without further movement from the UK. His call comes ahead of a summit of leaders tomorrow. Following reports he's decided to stand down next summer, a spokesperson for John Bercow says he'll make any announcement on his future as Commons Speaker directly to the House. Earlier, he allowed an urgent question over how bullying and sexual misconduct at Westminster is dealt with after an official report highlighted serious problems. Met Police say they're not treating a man who covered himself in petrol inside a bank in southeast London as terrorism. It happened on Bromley High Street this afternoon. A man's been arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. LBC weather, weakening bands of rain and drizzle moving across England and Wales overnight. Drier though elsewhere, a low of 4 degrees.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. LBC.
What constitutes a hate crime, and who do we, as in the legal system, need to protect? Let's turn to Dr. Loretta Trickett, who's an expert in criminal law.
What we're talking about is where somebody is targeted for a crime on an aspect of their identity.
Doctor, if I steal the handbag from a disabled woman in a wheelchair this afternoon, I'm going to get done. We don't need additional laws.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7. LBC.
For hundreds of years, Indian food has been about sharing great food with the people you love. For over 5 years, Manjal Restaurant have brought North and South India together in the heart of London. And due to its success, now we've come to Chigwell Loughton. Experience the essence of India and make memories with Manjal. Book now at manjalrestaurant.com.
Hi there, I've got a package from Mr. Peters.
Oh, lovely. We're just up the stairs. Past the Archer turret, up the 80-foot hot tar wall, over the moat with the crocodile, then left.
Okay.
But if you see a wall of sharpened logs, you've gone too far. So go right until you see the steel spiked gate. Go through there, then over the narrow bridge with the sharp drop.
Right.
And we're the lilac door surrounded by the wisteria in full bloom.
Fortify your home with BT Broadband. All our customers get BT Virus Protect with McAfee and parental controls included as standard. BT. Be there.
Calling all hard-working minicab drivers. Are you earning between £1,000 and £1,600 per week? No? Well, you could be, with Greyhound Car's 18% commission rate. As part of a pooling group of 45 minicab companies in London, we have high demand and are now offering 18% commission deals for new drivers. We allocate each job within 5 seconds to the nearest available driver, so you spend less time travelling to jobs and more time earning money. Apply today at greyhoundcars.co.uk.
Hey, you're home. How's the cold been?
Actually, after a day of meetings, working through lunch, running a full press conference, and a delayed train home, it wasn't that bad.
Wow.
I know. I had Lemsip by my side.
When cold, flu and chesty cough strikes, keep Lemsip Max all-in-one by your side. There's nothing faster or stronger. Lemsip, there for you. Contains paracetamol. Always read the label.
Is your money working as hard as you do? Think about it. While you're grafting away, is your money working too? No? Then it's time to Wealthify. Wealthify is the smart, easy way to start investing. Just say how you want to invest. Cautious, adventurous, somewhere in between? And let Wealthify do the rest. Then keep track of your money on the app. Easy. Isn't it time for you to Wealthify? Download the app or visit wealthify.com. With investing, capital is at risk and you could get back less than you put in.
Clear a house, clear an office, clear a little bit, or clear loads of it. With Clearabee, getting rid of rubbish is quick, easy and affordable. Choose our man and van rubbish removal service and we'll come and clear almost any rubbish from almost anywhere. Because whatever you want rid of, there's a Clearabee man in a Clearabee van who can do it professionally and legally. Book now at clearabee.co.uk.
Clear rubbish easily. Clearabee.
Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
We're discussing Saudi Arabia. Khashoggi goes missing, he disappears in the Saudi embassy, and all we can do is put out a sort of limp statement jointly with France and Germany. Yes, I know there are some that say let's not rush to judgment, but I promise you folks, if this was Russia, we'd be condemning them openly. Probably the United Nations would be in session as we speak. Now, Brexit, of course, not very far away. I'm heading off to Brussels first thing tomorrow morning. We've got this summit coming up, and things are looking very, very difficult for the government. I think she really began to understand over the course of the weekend that actually her own backbenchers are not going to be bullied by the whips, and she's got a real problem. But remarkable that sanctioned by Number 10 this morning, a letter appeared in the Times newspaper written by Sir Mark Sedwill, who is the acting Cabinet Secretary. And the letter is about Ollie Robbins. Now, you've heard a lot on this show about Ollie Robbins. He is the senior civil servant in charge of these negotiations. In fact, actually, he's really rather more important than the Brexit Secretary. And what Sir Mark Sedwill says is that it's wrong that people have been sniping at Ollie Robbins. This has to stop, the letter says. Our civil servants have always been trusted by our fellow citizens that whatever their views, they know that we are doing our duty to implement the decisions of the government they elect. Well, that's all well and good, Sir Mark. But the reason people don't like Ollie Robbins is because this isn't about the government, it's about us. We voted, Sir Mark, you may not like this, we voted to leave in a referendum, and one of your senior civil servants is doing his best to water it down and to delay it, and that's why we're angry, and we're not going to change our minds in a hurry. Donald Trump never, ever fails, does he? Never fails to surprise and stun with what he says. Fox News put out a tweet earlier on this afternoon. Federal judge throws out Stormy Daniels' lawsuit versus Trump. Trump is entitled to full legal fees. So a legal victory for Trump with this Stormy Daniels case. I guess he would be very happy and very relieved. What does Trump do? He retweets that and then adds his own comment. Great. Now I can go after Horseface and her third-rate lawyer in the great state of Texas. She will confirm the letter she signed. She knows nothing about me. A total con. So a triumphant Trump there, who talks about Stormy Daniels now as Horseface. And of course, this is the kind of thing that enemies of Trump just get simply enraged by, supporters of Trump laugh out loud. I tell you what, nobody ever said that his presidency was going to be conventional, because it certainly isn't. So are we being hypocritical over Saudi Arabia compared to the way we behave towards Russia? Sandra on Facebook says, well said, Nigel, hypocrisy all round. Pamela says, totally hypocritical, it's all about money. It sure is, Pamela. Rick says, if Saudi Arabia don't buy arms from the UK, they'll buy them from someone else. Rick, that was the point that was being made before the break. I'd love to hear from somebody who works in the aerospace industry. Let's go to Gerard, who's calling from Holborn. Gerard, good evening to you.
Hi there, Nigel. I wouldn't say it's hypocritical, because Saudi Arabia is a British creation. And even Churchill, early on as colonial secretary, said that he knew the Al Saud family and their followers were bloodthirsty. But so long as they were loyal to British interest, he had no problem with that. And ever since they've come into inception, they have been bloodthirsty. I mean, one journalist has been killed. I mean, for the last 3 years, Britain and America have been using Saudi Arabia to destroy Yemen. You know, it's not hypocritical in my book. I think it's the idea that Britain's a benevolent force is nonsense.
OK, so you think the sort of Churchill maxim still holds good today, basically?
Well, he was arming and funding these forces. You know, let's not forget that. And he knew that they were bloodthirsty, in his own words, but he was happy to do so because they were loyal to British interest. And that's the same with the relationship today. The British Army trained the internal security there and the military there, and the actual National Guard that keep the ruling family in power. So without Britain and the United States, I mean, Donald Trump even said himself, if we were to pull out, you'd fall in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, Trump has been very strong on that. But surely, Gerard, surely we should be stopping them. You know, spending money in this country and Germany, spreading. You know, sending, frankly, sending and arming some of these preachers of hate. Shouldn't we have stood up a bit more on some of this stuff?
Well, no, your economy is reliant on this cash, and the Al Saud family are a reliant source. At the end of the day, they've killed one journalist, as I said. What do you think they've been doing for the last 90 years in their country?
And we see this in full public view, and of course we have, state executions and all the things that go on, a very different level of standards to this country. Gerard, I take the point. We've always had this attitude towards Saudi Arabia from the time of Churchill. You've made that point extremely well. Now, Adrian takes issue with me. He says, and he's right in a way, the difference between these two incidents is that unlike the first one with the Russians, this last incident with the Saudis took place in a third country where they murdered one of their own. The Russians, on the other hand, used a lethal chemical weapon on European soil for the first time since the end of the war. This was a direct provocation towards the UK. I accept, Adrian, that point, that maybe one of the reasons Theresa May was stronger is because it happened here in this country. Yep, absolutely, I accept that argument. However, I do think that just to issue a sort of weak joint statement along with France and Germany still shows a degree of double standards, though I do take your point. Khashoggi's disappearance looks like it was caused by a Saudi government hit squad, and nothing will happen except for a few stern words, says Richard from Chelsea. Richard, that sounds about right. It looks like Pompeo, by going to Saudi Arabia, is going to get them to admit that this hit squad acted in a rogue way. This wasn't actually what was intended. Of course, we're hypocrites. The House of Saud is a despotic regime, but dollars matter, and petrodollars traditionally matter the most. Max from Grays in Essex, that of course is true. What else could we expect? To heck with the sales, not applying heavy levels of pressure, they risk creating another Putin or a Bashar al-Assad. Do they? Don't know that they do. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Either way, I think there's a big double standard here. Ian is a brand new caller from Liverpool. Good evening, Ian.
Hi, Nigel. Lovely to talk to you. I just came back from Saudi. It's not just about the aerospace and all the rest of it. I was on the King's Road. You can buy Rolls Royce there.
Yep.
I felt sorry for the salesman because he had the family of Saudis round this Rolls Royce, and he must have had about 10 child kiddie seats. And I got the impression if one of them didn't fit the Rolls Royce, they weren't having it.
I like that. That's brilliant.
It was as simple as that. But the King's Road, you can buy anything you want.
Yeah.
Now, I was there in a nice hotel, but you're within a complex. We had mirrors under the cars constantly. But the Americans are there. They've even got their own school there for their own children.
Yep.
And it's not just about the aerospace. And the other thing about Saudi is it's a strategic place. If war kicks out in the Middle East, it's a strategic place that the United States and we can all use. So you've got to keep them in close. Yes, it was a hit squad. Yes, someone made a mistake. A big mistake, and they're not going to get away with it too lightly, but at the end of the day they will get away with it.
Well, now Ian Trump talked about severe punishments. Was that just words?
Yes, it was just words. There's too many people there, Americans. I mean, the old guy I was speaking to there, he was an American. He'd been there 6 years. He was by himself. He said, but I can't go on, otherwise they're going to sack me, so I'm staying here to keep me down. But then I went back to Daman Airport. Oh, by the way, I was there for 2 weeks. I only saw 2 women, and they were 2 Filipino women who run the reception in this hotel.
Did you see any women driving, Ian? Because women were banned from driving, weren't they, until the beginning of this year? Did you see any female drivers?
It hadn't come in. It hadn't come in at that point. I did go to a shopping mall, and I went into something like Waitrose, and there was a woman who was serving, but behind the woman there was a man. She wasn't allowed to speak to me.
No. Funny, isn't it, Ian?
He dealt with everything.
We condemn Trump as a misogynist, and yet this is all fine, what happens in Saudi Arabia. I find double standards everywhere. Ian, can I ask you, do you yourself have business interests in Saudi Arabia?
We all have business interests in Saudi Arabia.
You're dodging me here a bit.
It's not just the aerospace industry.
All right.
There's a lot of companies. The other thing I'd just like to quickly point into you, when I went to the airport at Daman to fly to Dubai, every woman was wearing a burqa. It's only an hour's flight. When I got off at Dubai, I turned round and I saw all these women.
Yeah.
And I purposely counted. There was only 13 women came off that plane wearing burqas.
Ian, so if we were to take severe economic sanctions against Saudi Arabia, if absolute proof was given about Khashoggi's death, basically it would hurt you, it would hurt many of us and damage our national interest. Is that really the point you're making?
That is totally the point I'm making.
Okay, no, you've made it.
And especially at a time now where we're facing Brexit, we can't afford to upset
well, that's
Saudi
a slightly
Arabia.
separate argument, but I understand what you're saying. Ian, you've made the point, whether people agree with it or not. Thank you for the call. Ian there, who has business interests in Saudi Arabia, making the point, Rolls-Royces, aeroplanes, anything that we did in terms of sanctions would be an act of self-harm. It's true. Still think we're hypocrites. Hey, you're listening to Nigel Farage here on LBC at 6:45, and time for the news headlines with Lisa Aziz.
Ahead of a key summit of EU leaders tomorrow, the European Council presidents warned a breakthrough on Brexit talks may not be possible without further movement from the UK. A spokesperson for the Speaker of the Commons says he'll make any announcement on his future directly to the House, following reports John Bercow standing down from the role next summer. The Saudi consul to Istanbul has now left for Saudi Arabia, just hours after Turkey said his official residence would be searched in connection with journalist Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance. LBC weather, weakening bands of rain and drizzle moving across England and Wales overnight, drier though elsewhere, a low of 4 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm J. Louise Knight, and the clockwise M25 is slow between 27 for the M11, 3 to 28 at the A12 where a car has broken down. The A13 remains shut both ways between Stamford Le Hope and the Five Bells interchange following an accident this morning, and then huge queues out of town on the A127 from the M25 to an accident after the Noak Bridge turn-off. For the trains, a power failure at Peckham Rye means London Overground can't run from Surrey Quays to Clapham Junction, and just hearing about a power failure at Victoria Station, it means that southeastern services are at a stand, which is also causing delays on southern trains.
This is LBC.
Thomas Edison's light bulb moment didn't happen overnight.
Over 2 years, more than 3,000 designs were tested, an obsession that earned Edison a place in the history books. At Darwood & Tanner, we believe obsession is a good thing. It drives us to find a dental implant solution for every patient, even in the most challenging cases. Darwood & Tanner, your smile is our healthy obsession. Visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
We don't know your business yet, or what challenges it faces. We don't know your next big thing, or even where you started out. But we do know hundreds of businesses like yours. And at Barclays, we'd like to help yours too. We have a range of borrowing options to support your next big step, and smart digital tools for managing your business, even when you're on the go. Just search Barclays Business. Let's go forward. Subject to status and application, T's and C's apply.
Lanes 2 and 3 have reopened between the junction 1 and the roundabout northbound slow from southbound.
Driving is not a game. If you tailgate the car in front, the closer you get, the less time you'll have to react. Don't be a space invader. Stay safe. Stay back. Search Highways England for more information.
Rob's not ready for a lot of things in life, but he is ready for the new series. He's also ready for non-stop music. He's even ready for the perfect selfie. And he's definitely ready for incredible. Because when Rob buys the new iPhone XS or XS Max, he gets 10 gig extra data with Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready? Offer ends 19th of December 2018. Available on plans 16 gig and above. Terms and exclusions at vodafone.co.uk/iPhone data offer.
Do you have heart disease? Diabetes? Maybe kidney or liver disease? Flu on top of health conditions like these can easily develop into something very serious and land you in hospital. That's why the flu jab is free for you. You need it. So don't put it off. Contact your GP or pharmacist to get your free flu jab now. NHS. We're all here to help you stay well this winter.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't. I felt stupid and I began to cry. But then my teacher, she came over to me and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem that I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Search Get Into Teaching.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
We're always very quick to condemn Russia, less so it seems with Saudi Arabia, whether it's over the missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi or many other things over the years. Nigel, I want to thank you for discussing the possible murder of this journalist for the Saudis in Turkey. I'm horrified by the lack of outrage shown by the May government to this possible act of barbarism. However critical this journalist may have been about the Saudis, he did not deserve to be murdered, and yes, we should openly condemn them. Of course we're hypocrites, I get on Twitter. There was universal condemnation about Trump's visit, not least by London's mayor. Women's rights and human rights in Saudi Arabia under their ruler are barbaric. Yet Trump was vilified, balloons flown. We are hypocrites. We need to wean off dependency to Saudi oil. Then we could hit them with sanctions, remove them from the UN Human Rights Council and stop selling the weapons, says James from East London. Well, thing is, James, the economic interlinkages between us, the Americans, and the Saudis are pretty enormous. You know, when back in March it was said that over the course of the next decade there could be $100 billion worth of trade just between us and Saudi Arabia, you get an idea of how big it is. Doesn't mean we should be afraid to criticise them. Max in Essex says, well, 2 words sum this up. Vested interests. Absolutely. But Robert, on text, does make one interesting geopolitical point. He says, Nigel, the Saudi regime is certainly unpleasant, but it's a big chunk of stability in a desperately unstable part of the world. Let's not rock the boat. Robert, I do understand that argument, although in my 20 or so years in elected politics, the number of times I've heard despots all over the world who we think, gosh, aren't they awful? And yet we're always told by, the Foreign Office, effectively, and people like that, yes, but they bring us stability. And there are times when stability is not necessarily the answer. I think we could afford to be a bit more critical of them. That is my view. I think we're very hypocritical. What does Malcolm, a brand new caller from Baker Street, make of this? Good evening, Malcolm.
Nigel, it's nice to speak to you. I just wanted to say that we all basically know that Wimbledon Tennis Club has got more balls in this government, and they're not going to do anything about it. And the only thing that we can do about it, in my view, is quite simple, really. With the likes of countries like Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, North Korea, and all these despot countries, is how we sorted out the Second World War. We do preemptive strikes, and that's the end of the story. That's the only way you get rid of these bloody despots. I can tell you that for something, and I'm coming from West Yorkshire.
I'd never have guessed, Malcolm. I'd never have guessed. Hang on. We can't just launch strikes against regimes all over the Middle East, can we?
Well, excuse me, Mr. Farage. We did that in 1945 in Japan when the Japanese wouldn't want to surrender. And look what happened after that.
Well,
okay. Quite nicely, didn't it?
But I mean, we used, or the Americans more accurately, used 2 nuclear devices because they feared that taking the mainland of Japan might cost them 1 million casualties. This is a slightly different situation. And Malcolm, we could argue that the last times we have intervened and gone for regime change in that part of the world, one being Iraq, the other being Libya, both have turned out to be pretty bad results.
And the reason for that, Nigel, is because we didn't nuclear bomb them. That's why.
All right. OK, Malcolm, it's a point of view. Thank you. Oh, dear. Well, you get all sorts in the world, don't you? You're talking about the US or the UK punishing the Saudis, but no one is talking about what Turkey will do about it. I believe Turkey will do some kind of punishment to the Saudis, says Jimmy from Colchester. I don't know the answer to that, Jimmy. David is calling from Beccles. David, hi.
Hello, Nigel. It's a great pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak to you. So, I mean, we know that in terms of human rights and everything else, Saudi Arabia has a completely different culture to us. But does there come a point when we should be critical of them in their behaviour?
Well, I'm going to say that history is a wonderful thing and often repeats itself. I don't know whether you recall, Nigel, in the 1980s it must have been, in the cargo area at Stansted Airport, a police officer discovered a gentleman in a packing case on his way to Israel.
I think
his name was Dicko, Mr. Dicko. And the government response, they were like, heck, the chickens didn't know what to do.
Right.
So what I'm saying is I don't think this thing is an isolated incident. I think this, who knows who takes part in this sort of thing, but it's certainly got precedent in this country.
Right, so this was a dead body in a crate, was it?
No, he wasn't dead, he was alive. He was drugged up to the eyeballs. He was on his way to Israel against his better will.
Well, yeah, I mean, is it possible that actually what happened in Istanbul was that the job of the hit squad, in fact, was to abduct and deport Khashoggi, and that it all went wrong? I don't know. David, lots of governments do lots of bad things. My point is we're very quick to criticise anything we think the Russians have done wrong, but we're a little bit more squeamish when it comes to criticising Saudi Arabia.
Well, exactly. That's my point, is Nigel.
Yeah.
It was Israel.
Yeah, OK. Well, fine, David, thank you. And, yeah, sure, I'm sure we could criticise actions of the Israeli government too, but I'm trying, for the moment, to stick to Saudi Arabia. And there were certainly some that would say we should be more critical of Israel. Others who would say, hey, they're surrounded by a group of countries that want to wipe them off the face of the earth and need all the support we can give them. James is calling from the Midlands. Hi, James.
Hi, James. Hi, Nigel. Yes, thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
Not at all. So we could put sanctions on Saudi Arabia. We could show our moral outrage if it's proven that Khashoggi was murdered by the Saudi state. But would that act of self-harm achieve anything?
No, in my opinion, I don't think it will. And primarily, how can I say, there was all this hoo-ha about British aerospace, and if British aerospace pulled out, the French would be in there selling their armaments, etc., etc.
Yep.
And the Americans are there anyway. And it was the same with Margaret Thatcher and Purno Dam in Malaysia. business is business, and if we pull out, there's a lot of interest there. And one of your callers mentioned not just British aerospace, but there's the oil industry and the rest of the world.
Oh yeah, oil expertise, and as he said,
right, absolutely.
As he said, Rolls-Royce motor cars and all the rest of it. So James, I do get the point that if we were to do this on our own and pull out of Saudi Arabia, the French and others would be thrilled. I get the point. James, I thank you. I've got time for one last quick caller. Abdul, who's a new caller to the show from Maida Vale. Good evening, Abdul.
Hi, Nigel. Nice talking to you.
Good to talk to you. So, have we been pretty hypocritical on Saudi Arabia? Should we say things are rather tougher than this current limp-wristed statement?
This is not the first time these criminals or gangsters done this. It's not the first time, it's not the second time, it's not the third time, it's not the fourth time.
Mm-hmm.
The only horrible things happened to them this time is they done it in their own backyard or the council.
Yes, embassy, yeah.
Yes, and that's why the whole world outraged. They killed the man. And you know what? The Bin Salman was in Kuwait, visiting Kuwait. He's supposed to be there in Kuwait for about 2-3 days.
Mm-hmm.
He cut short that visit to watch the man murder.
Well, I don't know about that, Abdul, but you're saying basically this behaviour is consistent with the Saudi regime. Should we as a country be a bit more critical of the way they act?
I was listening to the show and I hear a lot of callers or texts you read, people mentioning that depends on oil and this and that. Basically, it should be other way around. Saudis cannot eat the filthy crude oil. They need to sell it.
And we buy it. Abdul, I get the point. Business is business. Many of you say, others think there is a sense of hypocrisy and moral outrage. I'm off to Brussels to the summit. I'll be broadcasting from there at 6 tomorrow. Goodness knows what the news will be. At 10.